All right, everybody, it's the top of the hour. Welcome to session 5A of the 2023 Peralta Online Equity Conference. The session is called Considering Generational Diversity in Online Courses, Strategies to Create Cross-Generational Student Engagement. Our speaker today is Jamey Harlow from South Piedmont Community College in North Carolina. Before we get started, just want folks to know that we are being recorded, so it's up to you whether or not you want to be on camera and such. We also have the captions enabled, so if you would like to have the auto transcript feature, go down to either the caption button, or if you don't see it because your window's a little bit smaller, you'll click the more button with the 3 dots and then choose the captions option, and you can set it up there. And last but not least, we encourage questions in the chat. So start them off, and Jamey, I'll be happy to field, at least let you know that they exist if you want to focus on the presentation. But I will hand it over to you to get us started.
Thank you. And we will kind of toggle back and forth with my PowerPoint presentation and my face, because I don't know. Can you all, when I share my entire window or my entire screen, and I put this PowerPoint up, can you still see me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Well, then we won't toggle back and forth. So today we are, of course, talking about how to engage students who are a diverse group. And so, you know, at community college, we typically have a lot of different voices in the room from all walks of life. And so this is going to be a conversation that kind of focuses on that. So the first thing that I want to do is just, you all could see this in the description, but we're going to talk a little bit about andragogy. We're going to discuss some teaching strategies. And in the meantime, if you would like to add something in, please do that. I would much prefer that this is a conversation and not me talking at you for 45 minutes. So I spent the last year of my time at South Piedmont as a faculty fellow. And the focus of my research was student engagement. And that is a very large umbrella. So I've looked at student engagement in multiple modalities, and I started the research kind of the way everybody starts research, right? So it began with a really exorbitant kind of literature review, right? And so that was extensive, and I did the literature review, and I put together some pilot groups, and we did some surveys. We surveyed students, we surveyed faculty. I started investigating teaching strategies and observing different professors in their classes. And, you know, all of those things were coming right along, and you know, we got some usable information. And then, you know, what happens with research is that sometimes it takes kind of a life of its own. And so that began to happen. It was kind of rolling along on its own. And sometimes life happens and something triggers a thought. And that's what happened for me. So my oldest son is in the Air Force. And so he is all over the world. He will call me from different places at different times. And he called, and I was watching something mindless on TV, probably Survivor, if I'm honest. And the phone rang, and I looked over, and, you know, on an iPhone, I'll FaceTime, and I swipe across, and I pick the phone up, and I'm holding it out. Hey, son. And it was black, but it said FaceTime. And, you know, his audio was a little low, but sometimes he's in weird areas. And so I just said, why can't I see you? And he was like, Mom, it says on the phone, FaceTime audio. You can't see me. It's audio. I'm using it because I can't make a phone call from here. And I was like, oh, let me, you know, put you on the speaker. He made fun of me for that. And so, you know, it's a good time, whatever. I just told him that when I become my mom, who cuts everyone's head off in a picture, then he can make fun of me for technology stuff. You all have one of those people in your family where you look back at the pictures and somebody's cut off. It's my mom. So he made fun of me. We went on with conversation. That night, after I finished watching Survivor and went to bed, I'm lying in bed and I am rolling things around in my brain the way you do. And I think, it's so weird that I am the person being made fun of now for my lack of knowledge in technology. I used to do that to my mom. And that kind of turned into a snowball, which was when I have my entire family in one place, let's say for Thanksgiving, my mom is what's considered a boomer, and I am Gen X, and my older children are millennials, and my younger children are Gen Z. And that is a really diverse group of people. And then my brain clicked over. So is my classroom. What if I start thinking about how we all prefer different things? What if I look into that? What does that do for student engagement? Because what would engage my mom may not engage me, and what engages my mom and I may not engage my 17-year-old son. And so that's how this kind of came about. I really was just thinking, why can't I see you on FaceTime? And so if you think about different people, then you can think about all of their preferences, right? So my mother prefers a desktop screen. And even at work, she has her laptop set up to feed into a desktop because she wants the big screen. I prefer my laptop screen, not as big as her desktop, but still larger than my daughter's MacBook, which is what she prefers. And my 17-year-old son logs into his learning management system on his phone, and he has no problem with that. He does his work right there on his phone, which I could never do. And so it really is a matter of preference, and everybody has one. So I want to take just a moment, and we are going to look at your preferences. And so in the chat, I am going to place a link to a Google form. It's very short and it's multiple choice. And I would like for you to fill out some answers for me. And we'll take a look at this together. So that's the form. You should be able to click right on it. Someone let me know if it's not working for some reason. That happens. And these are just going to be your basic questions about your behaviors. Do you memorize things? When you are learning, and this may be in a professional development or it may be in an actual classroom setting, when you are learning, how do you view your instructor? It looks like we've got a couple of responses in here. I'm going to give everybody just a few more seconds to kind of finish that up. Go with your first response because they're usually, you know, the most precise. So let's take a look at these. So this is what we have on that first question. Do you memorize information? And so I just want to kind of let you know where you stand. Each of the A answers that you used, A, indicates that you share some learning behaviors with Gen X. That would be me. Each of the B answers that you gave, and we didn't have anyone who gave a B in this first one, those signify that you share some learning behaviors or learning preferences with Gen Z. Each of the C answers indicate that you share some learning preferences with the boomer generation. And D indicates that you share some learning preferences and behaviors with millennials. And so this is kind of where our participants kind of come in. Wow, there's a lot of Gen Z shared behavior here. What was that one? Prefer to skim. Yeah, it's pretty common. So what I also want you to recognize is that you may have landed in different areas or within different generation titles according to what the question was, because it's really important for us at this point to recognize that generation titles truly are a generalization, right? I mean, these are things that are known to be preferred by people in that age group, but it doesn't necessarily encompass everyone. Adult students are highly diverse, and they are affected by different experiences and different preferences, motivators, interests. But you can kind of see how the generations have been named according to their birth year here. And for me, every single one of these labels are people who are in my classroom and all in the same classes. We have a really big population at our college of CCP students, which are dually enrolled high school students who are taking college courses to kind of get ahead. And so we may very well have a 17-year-old sitting in the room with people who are considerably in a different place in their life. And so that makes for a very interesting learning environment. It also is kind of a struggle sometimes when I'm trying to design the course. So when I decided to start thinking about these differences, these different preferences and motivators and experiences, I first sat down with the 6 principles of andragogy. And for those of you who maybe don't know, and I'm certain that many of you do, these are the 6 principles of andragogy. Adults are different learners. They come with experience already. They accelerate when we tie learning to their experiences in life. They have a need to know. Basically, they want to know, how does this benefit me? What's in it for me, right? Adults typically have a strong self-concept, and they thrive on self-direction. They like to have some control over their learning. They have readiness, which just means that they learn best when what they're learning can help them solve an immediate problem, when it's applicable, when it's relevant. And that falls into the next category that you see there, which is problem orientation, right? Adults learn best when the content is problem oriented. They want specific knowledge and specific skills. And the best way that I can think of to kind of put that into perspective for people is, can you remember being an elementary school student? And I have very vivid memories of this. I would learn something, a random fact at school, and I couldn't wait to tell everyone at the dinner table the really smart thing that I learned at school. And it may or may not ever be used again, but I picked up on that one fact that I thought sounded really brilliant, and I took it home and I waited. And when everyone was sitting around and could hear me, I told them what I learned at school that day. But adults are a little different in that they want to learn things that are relevant to what they are doing, to their goals. And so they also have a good dose of intrinsic motivation, and their motivation looks a little different than maybe K-12 students. They learn best when they're internally motivated, but that doesn't mean that adults can't be externally motivated. It just means that a lot of times their bigger motivator are things like, this is going to help me advance in my career, or this is learning something about myself that I can apply to life. For instance, in a psychology class, a lot of times you learn something in a psychology class and it gives you an aha. So those are all things to consider when you're teaching adults. And so I sat down and I took a look back through all of the adult learning theory and the principles. And then I started looking at principles of effective instruction to encourage contact between students and faculty, because people are social and they want to interact. And that doesn't mean that everybody is an extrovert, right? Some people prefer to work alone, but they still do crave social interaction. To develop reciprocity and cooperation among students. Having a community is an important part of learning for adults. And active learning techniques. Typically, adults, and we found that even before that, active learning techniques have a really big impact on what students can keep in their brain, what they truly understand, how they make meaning of things. And then applicable feedback and prompt applicable feedback, because everyone wants to know how they're doing, if what they're doing is right, if they've been spending their time well, if their work is good. Everyone wants to know that. And if not, they want to know how to fix it. So prompt applicable feedback is definitely a principle of effective instruction. So I sat down with the principles of andragogy and the principles of effective instruction, and I started thinking about, how those things kind of work with generational preferences or strategies that help different generations of learner. And so what I'd like to do right now is I would really like for you all to share with me, is there a challenge that you currently have with student engagement? What's one challenge that you currently have? And have you faced that challenge before? Or is this a recent change? Because in my research, I've found that many instructors and professors all over the place are saying, well, student engagement has always been kind of an important big deal, but it has been even harder post-pandemic. And so I would like to know from you guys, and you can use the chat or you can unmute and speak, either is fine for me. What's one challenge that you currently have with student engagement?
See, Charlotte has her hand up.
Okay.
Okay, hi, let me
Hi.
show my face. So the challenge is that my classes are all asynchronous, and and how do I get people engaged? Like, for example, one thing I try to do is I try to have live Zoom lectures and live study sessions and whatnot, and then I record that and post it later. But I don't know what else I'm missing, because I feel like there's something missing that I could do to make it even more engaging. So.
Okay, so that's a good one, Charlotte. I definitely think the live sessions are super helpful. Someone put in the chat that it's hard to build relationships that are meaningful. And I would think that would be a struggle with asynchronous learners. And in just a few minutes, we're going to start building a checklist. I do have a few ideas for you. And I like to give people something tangible that they can take away and use immediately when they do something like this. So I will post that in the chat as well. What else do we have going on here? Wow, it's going crazy. Okay. Asking questions during class and they don't answer. Oh, okay. Okay. So one suggestion that I have for the not answering questions is that early on, I start with really easy, basic questions. Things that don't apply to my content at all, just to get them comfortable with using their voice online, just to get them comfortable with talking. Things like, all right, guys, before we start class today, I have to know, what is your favorite place to get a chicken sandwich if it's fast food? Go, right? And then everybody just says a fast food restaurant. And that seems really silly, but they've heard themselves online now. And they've spoken for the first time and the ice is broken, at least for that day. So that's something maybe to try to get them to answer. And then student focus is split. Yeah. That's tough for online learners, especially. Someone else. Hard time getting them to respond verbally to open-ended. Understanding directions, even with the video recording to support instructions. Okay, student attendance has been a major issue. We find that as well. Sorry, guys, I have to keep scrolling down the chat in order to. Okay, getting students to take the initiative to reach out to you when they have questions. Oh, they want to be spoon-fed. We find that a lot too. So someone said, Charlotte said that she gives a long pause to get students to speak. I do that as well, Charlotte. And it gets a little awkward sometimes, but you just have to know going in that it's going to be a little awkward. And then somebody will answer, usually. One thing that gave them joy today, Amy, I love that. It's kind of the same principle as asking something that is really low stakes, something they're not afraid to answer. It breaks the ice of speaking in class. These are all really good and all really common.
We've got a
And
hand
none of them are
raised by Darylon Evans.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for speaking.
I just wanted to share some of the strategies that I've used because I've taught online for the last 5 years. And I teach both synchronous and asynchronous. Asynchronous can be a bit challenging because some of the students really don't want to be bothered. They don't want to meet. They don't want to do things like that. So I've had to find other creative ways to keep them engaged. I try to make at least the welcome meeting a mandatory meeting that I give points for so that they can talk to me, see me, ask any questions that they may have. And then I also create student lounges within my courses. It's a discussion thread where they can ask me questions, but I often give it about 24 to 48 hours before I jump in to see if they're going to help one another out also. And then I do a lot of other things that I incorporate, but in the classes that I teach that are, there's some classes that I do make regular
Your sound
meetings
cut out.
a requirement. I'm sorry, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, okay. So there's some classes that I do make meeting regularly a requirement. And so during those meetings is where we get to have a lot of, discussions and have an opportunity to engage with one another. It can be challenging, however. I've also tried the long pause, you know, it does get a little uncomfortable, but once students see you're not going to spoon feed them the information and you are going to require them to come prepared with some type of content from the readings, articles, videos you've shared, it ends up working out well. And once they get the first little wiggles out, knowing it's okay for them to speak up and that they don't need to have the right answers, that ends up working well too.
Yes, those are fantastic. Thank you. And I love the lounge idea. I love that, to see if they'll help each other before you have to step in and help them. And I agree, the long pause works for me. It is awkward though. The first few times that it's done, it's really awkward. So, sync and async, a one-on-one meeting depending on class size before the class begins so that they can get practice in the online environment. That's a great idea, Christy. That's a fantastic idea. So all of these are in the chat here, and some of you answered each other, and I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. So the kind of next place that we need to go here is to, and we're back. This. So I needed to kind of compare general preferences. And you notice I put the word general in here, folks, because these are generalizations. And I don't want to overlook the science that says these are generalizations. They are, but they are also common preferences. And so here they are. As far as technology goes, you know, I laughed a little in the beginning about my son making fun of me for technology use, right? I didn't realize there was a FaceTime audio. But a lot of times we think that our older adult students maybe don't want to use tech, but the truth is that they don't mind. They do appreciate walkthroughs on any technology tools that you are introducing or providing. They really appreciate that. Gen X has experience watching tech kind of make huge jumps, right? So they're kind of naturally they're digitally adaptive. Many of you can remember jumps in technology. For me personally, I remember before there were computers. And then, you know, now I'm looking at my daughter's MacBook Pro, and it's teeny tiny and it weighs about the same amount as my phone. But the first computer I ever saw was on a rolling cart, and it was enormous. So I've watched that kind of unfold, and typically Gen X is pretty comfortable with technology. This group responds well to storytelling, and they appreciate experience. If you can relate the content to an experience of yours, or if you ask them to relate the content to an experience of theirs, that is generally preferred. Gen X responds well to real world assignments and case studies. They want to know that it works. They want proof that what you're telling them is true. We have one group here that prefers a structured learning environment with clear guidelines, and we have another group that also prefers a structured environment, but includes some small group activities. The next thing is that you'll notice both teams kind of value social interaction. So we have relationship and team building on the boomer frame there, and then below it, Gen X gravitates towards self-directional opportunities, right? They are your students who really like to work async, but they also like small group activities, and that shows that they are not opposed to social interaction with their peers. Then we have the millennials here. They were the first to be called digital natives because they have a really high technological fluency. Gen Z is a true digital native. They don't remember a time before there were smartphones or Google. They are tech savvy. The millennials value information that they can relate to and apply practically. And that's very in line with what we saw with Gen X. Gen Z is very career-minded and they appreciate relevance in learning. That's something that's common throughout every generation, but it is particularly relevant to Gen Z. They want to know, not only do they have that adult need to know what's in it for me, but how is this going to get me where I want to go? How does this relate to my future career? We have millennials that prefer precise learning with bite-sized content. They don't want a long lecture. They want pieces. And then Gen Z that predominantly learns by doing. They prefer active learning environments. They also like bite-sized content. So they're very they're very close relation to the millennial learner. And then the last category here, millennials enjoy communicating. They like to share ideas and knowledge. And then Gen Z, they crave community and connection, but not in the traditional group work way. And so what does that mean? Well, we are going to take a look at a document that I will also put in the chat for you so you guys can make a copy of it. It's a Google Doc. And it has the chart that we just looked at on the top of it. But then the back section of this document is a checklist. And so these are some strategies that I have found that when I sit down with the chart of adult learning theory and a chart of effective instructional practice, and then I lay that side by side with the preferences from different generations, these are some strategies that align to everyone. And so you'll notice here, again, is my disclaimer that these can be generalizations, but inclusive teaching and learning practices benefit everyone. It doesn't matter what generation you are or what your learning preferences are. Inclusive practices benefit everyone. And so I put the document in the chat for you guys. You should be able to click it. You should also be able to click on file and make a copy in Google Docs so that you can add to it and use it as your own. But here is kind of a checklist. So I often include short and easy student inventory at the beginning of a course. I collect some details about students and they never mind talking about themselves, right? Some professors do this in a PowerPoint. Some do it in a much simpler way, a Google form or a Microsoft form. I use a form because they also like the way the form will line things up for me. And I can tell when certain people in my class have things in common. And so it just kind of helps me to consider how to make my assignments relevant. I tell short applicable stories when I'm teaching, and I feel like that helps build a relationship with students. They get to know me a little, and they want to know you. And so it makes me approachable, and it also will help with those moments of silence, you all, because if I have built a relationship with a group of students and they see that I am uncomfortable in this moment of silence, they will reach out and answer for me. If nothing else, they'll do me a favor. And I video those short sessions and I post them into the course so that the asynchronous learners are not left out from any sharing that I do with the class, which I think is kind of in line with what you were saying, Charlotte. I break up the information to avoid cognitive overload. And that's helpful for all students, not just the millennial students or the Gen Z students, but breaking things up keeps it interesting. You know, if you sit through an hour lecture, you're likely at some point to zone, right? You're likely to kind of nod off in your own space for a moment. That is particularly true with online learners because they're at home, surrounded by their children or their pets or their, family. And so keeping things broken up kind of keeps their interest here where it needs to be. short videos, I highly recommend that. We found that giving explicit instructions and modeling every assignment using a video, especially for discussion boards, which sounds crazy, but students sometimes don't know what we're looking for in a discussion board. And so modeling a discussion board for them really helps. A lot of times using a non-example, using a non-example helps students understand what to do by seeing what not to do. And I wasn't sure what else to call that except a non-example, but I will show them a discussion board that is a really good response and a discussion board that needs development. So they know that this is not what I'm looking for and this is, if that makes sense. It's a non-example. I generally have students ask their peers a question about their initial discussion response because it tends to make things move along like a conversation, an actual conversation. And that is social interaction, even for the students who are asynchronous, even for the students who prefer to work alone. They're still getting social interaction with their peers if there's an actual conversation happening and not just a, I agree. So I typically say you need to ask one question of your peers. We found that encouraging students to collaborate, create, and share experiences. You know, adult learners, back to the principles of adult learning theory, right? They come with their own set of experiences. And when you can tap into that and have them share it with each other, actual meaningful learning takes place. This can be done any way that you like. It can be as simple as a polling application, or it can be, you know, a Google Slides presentation that they peer review for each other. But having them collaborate and create and share their experiences seems to really resonate for all of the students in the room. Providing specific and applicable feedback. So that is one of the principles for good instruction. But I take this a step farther and I ask our pilot instructors this spring to do it as well. And it seemed to really work well for students. So a lot of your learning management systems have the capability to give feedback via a voice recording or a video. And I found that doing that, even if I can only fit it in for one assignment a semester, doing that and being able to address a student by name and give them specific feedback to their work makes them feel as though they have received personal attention and they have a relationship with me. And then students are a lot more likely to ask me questions when they're struggling. And so that's something that you may want to try. And then including students in decisions when possible, because we know that adults really like to have a stake, a say-so in their own education. And this can be something as simple as asking students to find short videos that illustrate the concept or the problem that's being covered, because they are a lot better at finding things than we give them credit for. So a lot of times my students, I'll say, I want you to scour YouTube or look at TikTok, do whatever it is that you do and find me some video content that illustrates this concept. And that's what they're turning in. That's the assignment. And they will give me things that I can often reuse in a future class to illustrate that concept. So, you know, these are just a list of ideas and suggestions and strategies that you can try immediately in your classroom. You can take this document, you can make a copy, you can add your own things. And I hope that that will be helpful. Are there any questions about the document itself?
A comment that it's amazing. Thank you for putting it together. And I also made a link to it from the conference website, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
For those
Absolutely.
people watching the recording, they won't miss out because they don't have the chat.
Absolutely. Great. So Guys, we have reached the end here. And so I really would love, I'm sorry, I have to keep clicking through this. I don't know what's going on with my PowerPoint. I would really love to get connected with you all. My email address is here. I'm on LinkedIn. So, you know, email me anytime with suggestions or questions, information that you would like to share. I do a lot of teaching exchanges for our college. And every time I go in prepared to give faculty information, I leave with just as much information as I came with. They give me as much as I give them. And it is so helpful. So I would love to connect with you all. Again, there's all of my information. And so thank you very much for your time today. Let me know if you have questions or comments or you would like to connect.
And we do have about 5 minutes. So if folks have any follow-up questions for Jamey before we close out the session, let us know. Jamey, I'll say that a lot of what you said resonated, especially some of the responses to the things in the chat about not only having some simpler tasks for students to kind of get them used to being engaged, but also doing it early. For example, in my class, I just had the idea mid-semester that it would be a good idea for students to not only do a team discussion, but as a team, summarize that discussion, because they will be asked in the workforce to come up with an analysis of group work. And one of the students, one of the ones who's very active, said, I don't think it's fair that you're asking us to do this completely new type of task this far into the semester, where it's week 12 out of 16. And I said, you know, you're probably right. I should have started this type of activity at the beginning of the term. And so I let students know that they could do it as an option, but didn't have to. But it just points to the fact that students fall into patterns, and they also set up their schedules according to those patterns, especially if they're working, taking care of children or other adults who need caregivers. And so just recognizing that it's probably not what we often assume, that students just don't want to do the work. They're lazy. They're in their bedrooms, in their bed, trying to do this class. Instead, they're dealing with a lot of other stuff.
They absolutely have competing commitments. That's what I see most often, is that my students they have a commitment to school and they want to do well, and they've come to school obviously of their own volition. So there's something they want from this, but they also have work and kids and life. And so they have competing commitments. And so it is easy to fall into kind of a regimented schedule and expectation.
Jamey, do you mind revisiting in the beginning? I missed a part of it with my technical problems here. You mentioned for the survey results, I was trying to figure out which I fell under, and I couldn't remember which letter corresponded to which of my response.
Okay, so the answers A were Gen X learning preferences. The answers B were Gen Z learning preferences. The answers C were the boomer generation, and the answers D were millennial.
Okay, thank you so
I
much.
always find that interesting because I'm kind of all over the place on that assessment.
Well,
Yeah.
and in this conference around equity, when I worked with a community college system, a statewide system, some of the comments from students in the surveys, those who might be classified as boomers, said, hey, I'm an older student in my 40s, and I often don't feel like they want me here. If I look at the literature for the college, if I look at the website, it's all young, late teens, early 20s in their backpacks. And I'm a person who's working full time and going back to community college so that I can upskill for the workforce. And, you know, am I really wanted here? So when we think about these cross-generational strategies that Jamey has provided. We also want to think about just creating a welcoming atmosphere for all generations to be learners in our classes. So thanks again for just making this a part of the equity conversation, Jamey.
Absolutely. Thank you all for coming. And if you don't have anything else, I think that's our time.
It is. I'm going to post a link in the chat, folks, that this will be recorded. And so we hope that you will all join us asynchronously. And so those of you who are watching the recording, we'll make sure you have access to everything else on the website. But yeah, in 15 minutes, we'll start another round of sessions. So go check out the schedule at a glance, and I will post a link to that as well, so that you can find what session you need to be at and where the Zoom room is.
Great. Thank you.